Welcome to a football show Monday edition. That is Zach Lyons. I am Braden Gall, and we are, of course, brought to you by our great, amazing, and wonderful friends, Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. Happy 4th of July to everybody out there. Zach, how are you, my friend?
July 8th.
I hope everybody had a great. I said I hope everyone had a great 4th of July holiday weekend.
You said happy 4th of July. That does not work anymore.
What the fuck ever. I hope everyone had a wonderful holiday weekend. Is that okay? Is that okay?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. I hope you had a wonderful.
The holiday was Thursday, but
I hope okay. I celebrated all weekend. It was my birthday weekend. Like, I celebrated the whole time. So I had a great holiday weekend. I hope you, Zach, had a great holiday weekend. I hope all our audience members and our listeners had a great holiday weekend. And next week on the show, we will be live from Dallas, Fort Worth at SEC Media Days. So we're going to have a little bit more college flavor on the show next week. But that will, in theory, be the last week before training camps start to open up. So we thought, what better time to look ahead at sort of the biggest things, the stuff, the storylines, whatever cliche you want to put in a clicky headline, the things that we are most looking forward to seeing, the things we think will define this Titans training camp. We're going to look at the offense today. We're going to look at the defense, of course, on Thursday. If you would like to sign up for the In Crowd, which is, of course, the loyalty program at Sinkers Beverage in East Nashville, please do so now. There will be cool stuff coming for all those in-crowd members. I got a bottle of Blanton's Gold. I have never had one. I've never seen one. I've never tasted one. And I found one because I was a member of the in-crowd. I got my email. I showed up. The allocation cart was sitting there, and I arrived in time to get one. And I'm in collection mode, Zach. I don't open and drink any of these anymore. I just collect them and put them on the shelf, and maybe I can put one of my kids through college when I sell them all one day. But no, Sinkers Beverages, really rare stuff. Great selection of all kinds of beverages, every single thing you could ever need for a party. And of course, you can Uber Eats Sinkers in case you run out at a party and you don't want to drive, which you shouldn't. Make sure you search Uber Eats, search Sinkers, and they'll deliver the booze directly to your house.
Hey, they drive so you can drink.
Kingston Group, Nashville's locally owned, award-winning custom home and remodeling firm. My wife and I have used the Kingston Group to do 2 huge projects on our house. That's all you need to know. I literally would not use another company. I have not used another company. I won't use another company. So why would any of you use a different company? Go to the Kingston Group. Check out the Kingston Group. I promise you they'll make your house more valuable, better, whatever it is you're working on, they will help you with it. So check them out. BuildKG.com is the website. So when you and I were talking about the show, there's a lot of different ways you can sort of like frame the conversation about previewing camp from an offensive perspective. There's position battles, there's players, there's storylines, there's question marks, there's all kinds of things. But I really want to dive into like the head of Zach Lyons, and I want to know just the things that you are most looking forward to that you think will either define the season, define the offense, define the future. There's no real framework for this. You can kind of take it where you want to take it. And I've got some things I've written down. You've got some things. There's probably some overlap in there, but we're gonna go back and forth here and have some fun. And there you go. And yes, Stoney, I'm happy to have you over at my house for a tasting of some of that bourbon. But only if you bring the better half, Stoney. Okay, you're not invited alone. You have to bring the better half. If you bring the misses, then
he'll bring me. I'm sure he'll bring me.
You're definitely not the better half. I'm not sure what you count as when it comes to their marriage. In fact, I'm not sure I want to know what you count as when it comes to their marriage. All right, but Stoney, you're always invited. Just tell the missus we said hello. She's lovely and wonderful and great and amazing that she puts up with you like all of our wives. Okay. Zach, is it? I guess there's got to be. You got to be starting with the quarterback here, right? Right.
Well, yeah. If you're talking about most defining, storyline or player for this entire season, it's definitely the quarterback. I mean, you could throw in the play calling ability of Brian Callahan, which kind of gets overshadowed a little bit. Like, we talked a lot about it at the beginning of the hiring, and now it's like it hardly ever gets brought up. But I was going through talking about the NFC North for a video for Stacking the Inbox, and it was kind of like they're going up against the Bears, they're going up against the Packers, and you're like, at what point does Brian Callahan really find his play calling groove? and there's a lot of milestones for this NFC North part of the schedule. And I'm looking at like week 8, and I'm like, man, Brian Callahan's play calling and sequencing. We're gonna know a lot about Brian Callahan by the time week 8 rolls around, and we won't know that really in training camp, and we won't know that even in preseason. That's probably, the more I think about it, that is the biggest unknown factor for this Titans team in 2024. Is that, and we're not going to know about it for a very long time. And it doesn't mean that, the first 8 weeks, that's the play caller he'll always be or anything. But later on down the road, I mean, at what point is he the guy that has to give up the play calling duty because it's just too, and if it ever gets, it will or anything, but if it ever gets to that point. So like really Brian Callahan is the most important thing, but we won't know much about Brian Callahan through training camp. Maybe we get a glimpse at joint practices or something like that, but we won't really know much about that. So then it goes down to Will Levis. It goes Brian Callahan, then Will Levis, in my opinion. And Will Levis is stuff you can figure out during camp. You can look at the mechanics. We talked about that with Malik Willis last year. You can figure out what Malik Willis can be or will be. And just this year, you'll be able to figure out what Will Levis is. Y'all, as a media group that goes out there and everything, will see more. You'll have more exposure to Will Levis this year than you did last year, and you'll have it with him running the ones. He's not time with Malik Willis. He's not, he's not behind Ryan Tannehill. He is the guy. So the biggest storyline is Will Levis, and it comes down to what can you all, the media who was there last year, the media who's going to be there this year, that same group, what do you all see as the big jump, the biggest differences? And if you don't see a lot of differences, that's probably not a good sign. Unless all differences are bad, then it's still not a good sign.
Yeah. So I want to turn my question back to you, and I would like to hear your answer to this, because I completely agree. I think everyone understands that Brian Callahan, Will Levis, the relationship, I think specifically to your point about play calling with Brian Callahan is the number one thing, the thing he hasn't done. But he, as he said, got to learn how to adjust and adapt in games. Will Levis, to me, it's about processing and accuracy, and it's about command of the offense, and like sort of the thing that, again, Malik Willis could not show us, which is read the defense, make the decision, let it rip, right? Like, and so what my question is, what I wrote down after trying to think through, like, what am I looking for? And sure, we can look at mechanics, maybe less of a dropped arm slot, maybe less of a back foot, maybe throwing a little quicker. Maybe it's not the average depth of target, that was so high last year. Maybe it needs to be a little bit lower so that he's throwing inside the offense. I think there's some small things. But my question that I landed on, because I could not figure out how to pinpoint what I'm going to be looking for specifically, outside of a few very granular things, is how much can we actually learn in camp about Will Levis's processing and Brian Callahan's play calling. And I think in red zone, we'll have some moments where we're going to see, and we saw it in minicamp, where we're going to see, did the scheme just work? Did it get a guy wide open, and did Levis just hit him? We might see that. We're going to see interceptions, and we're going to see bad throws and good throws, and he's going to have a great practice and a bad practice. And people are going to lose their shit all over the internet about one day of practice here and one drill over there. And ultimately, what I want to ask you, just generally, like, how much can we actually learn about the Levis Callahan future in training camp? And I struggle to answer that question. I really do, until you get games.
I think you can learn a lot. It just won't define anything. Does that make sense? Like, you can learn a lot. It's just, that means you still need more evidence. You're still going to need to see proof of concept. So you can go into a meeting or something and learn a lot about a company, like Shark Tank, right? Like Shark Tank, they go in there and they say, "Hey, sharks," and then they go do a spiel for, however long. Sometimes they have the product, sometimes they don't. Sometimes they need to hear, the sharks ask questions about proof of concept, about how much profit they've made. So you're going to be able to find out a lot about the product. You're going to be able to find out how much has Will Levis changed from year 1 to year 2. You're going to be able to see training camp Will Levis from year 1 and training camp Will Levis from year 2 and be able to take that. Is he missing easy throws? Is he still making the same mistakes that he was making and that they were okay with him making in the mini camp OTA portions, the pajama practices, but they don't want him making them now in training camp? You get what I'm saying? They said specifically that when training camp rolls around, we don't want to see all these mistakes hardly anymore. And he's supposed to have taken the time to iron out all these mistakes. He's gone down to Cabo and brought a ton of people with him. He's putting in the work. But does that work? We've talked about it many, many times with Will Levis. We're not concerned with Will Levis's work ethic. We're not concerned about Will Levis's leadership or his desire. It's about those things translating into production on the field. So at this point, I do think that in training camp you'll be able to learn a lot more about Will Levis than you will about Brian Callahan, outside of like Brian Callahan's coaching style, right? You're going to see a lot of Brian Callahan's teaching, a lot of his coaching style. We'll learn more about Brian Callahan, the head coach, that relates to the locker room and relates to maybe preparation than we will see about Brian Callahan, the game day play caller. You may get a glimpse again at joint practices, but really nobody's opening up the playbook at any of this kind of stuff. But you do want to have enough plays, enough diverse plays to be able to progress your offense and take advantage of these, trying to figure out where you're going with the football, what works best against what these defenses may show you. And that's the thing, right? That's something that you just talked about, was the plays. Like, did the scheme or did that particular offensive play work? And did it work and it resulted in Will Levis throwing a touchdown or hitting the right guy? Or did it work, but Will Levis failed to do what the play was meant to do? So, again, you'll be able to find out a lot more about Will Levis than you will about Brian Callahan as far as it pertains to on Sundays.
I think that's true. First of all, Stoney's pajama practices would be completely nude. Of course, obviously, why would we expect anything else? Kenneth says you could see how Levis does against Snead, Cheeto, and McCreary instead of facing guys like Trey Avery. That's true if they're out there. That's absolutely true. I still don't. I've been to enough of these Titans camps now and to college camps that I still don't know if there's a 1-for-1 correlation of like success or failure in a practice versus success or failure in a game. It's still very hard, in my opinion, to pick that up. Glory Day says it's speeding up pre-snap reads for me. Don't know if we see that before the regular season. That's also possibly we could see, but also maybe not. And so I think you're right that we'll learn more about Levis. But I still think what I struggle with is he could show us all of that stuff. And I agree, against Seattle is going to be our best real look at how does he see the field before the snap? And how does he see the field? How does he go through the accuracy and the progressions and the processing? That'll be better against Seattle than anything else that we see. I still think there's a chance that Will Levis is a gamer. And I hate that term in general, but some guys are just better when the shit is on the line. You know what I mean? Like, and there's a chance that he just that he might be that. There's a chance he might not be. So I can see us learning, especially if Brian Callahan is as good as answering questions in camp as he is pre-camp, where if the media can go to him and say, look, did he make that read correctly? Are you seeing a processing speed up with him? What is it that you're working on with him? If he can give us honest answers on that stuff, then we'll actually get more from the horse's mouth, I think. But ultimately, I still think it's very difficult to know. I mean, outside of seeing maturity and leadership, which I think I'm just not that worried about. Like, I think that's what he does very well. I think we're going to see a more professional version of Will Levis. Like we've already seen a more professional version of Josh Wiley and Peter Skoronski. And like he knows his role that benefits him, comfortable state, all that kind of stuff. I think we're going to see all that. I just don't know that if we're going to learn anything about 3rd and 8 with the game on the line, on your own 36-yard line, can you make the play? And I just can Callahan call the right play? Like I don't think we can learn that until we get to games, but we'll see. All right. So that's number one.
I will say that I think with Will Levis, like I said, it's all about taking what you saw from Will Levis last year, because there was stuff that, there's stuff that people have seen from Malik Willis and Ryan Tannehill dating back a few years now that did translate. They did have issues. Same with the offensive line. You know, the offensive line obviously had issues last year, and they had issues all throughout the year. But we saw those issues with Ryan Tannehill. So, you know, that year he was throwing a bunch of interceptions in training camp, and then they went into the regular season, and he was just kind of average. Like, he wasn't, you know, 2020, 2019 Ryan Tannehill. You know, there's times where you saw what Malik Willis was his first year. You saw what Malik Willis was his second year in those training camps, and those translated to in the game, and there wasn't progress. So we have something to compare Will Levis to. It's just Will Levis of last year. So we know what his problems are in the game, right? He's played in big moments, and he's won some big games, and he's made some incredible throws, but he's also held onto the ball too long, and he's put the ball out of reach at some points and all this stuff. Yeah. So if that continues, because it was happening in minicamp and OTAs, but they said that's okay. They kind of wanted, you know, these mistakes to happen and to use them as teachable moments. But if they continue, that's a concerning trend over a pretty large sample size for the NFL. So I do think that you can, but I do agree with your sentiments. Like, some dudes just turn it on during the game. Like, it's just they are Sunday football players.
And honestly, like, it takes a special type of athlete, any sport, to like practice literally the way you play. Like, it takes I don't care who you are, how good you are, what sport you're in. It's really hard. Like, unless you're a scout teamer fighting for a roster spot, and every rep of every drill, your life and your career depends on it. If you are the established guy, I think human nature eventually takes over, and you're like, okay, I'm practicing this, so I'm going to work on it, and then the game starts, and you're like, I don't know, I think that's human nature. Anyway, all right. So what else you got? By the way, Sinker's Beverages, their sister store is Bluegrass Beverages up in Hendersonville, so make sure you support them. Proud sponsor of football and other F words. Of course, they've got their own rewards program called the Best of Bluegrass, the Bob program. Same deal. Sign up for that program, and you will get information and about events and about summer stuff that's coming out, about deals. They got all kinds of wine specials and liquor specials, and also great allocation up there as well. So make sure you sign up for that. And of course, as you mentioned, stackingtheinbox.com if you want Titans coverage from Zach, and lowerbroadhockey.com over there at Substack for all your Nashville Predators coverage. Have had an awesome response from you Predators fans. So come on over. The chat is super, super fun. We're doing videos. We're doing podcasts. We're doing prospect almanacs. We've got all kinds of inside information over there. So please come over and check out Lower Broad Hockey over at Substack as well. Okay. Storyline number 2 for you. Where are you going?
I think it's the right tackle battle. And we've talked a lot about the right tackle battle, but it really feels like open season. A lot of people are really putting Jerron Christian over there at the right tackle spot as a major, I guess, battle participant, if you will. I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, because he has played very little right tackle his whole career. So I don't understand, when your left tackle depth is not very good, why you would sacrifice that and try that over on the right tackle side. I don't get it. I don't understand that sentiment. I mean, I can understand it. I just don't agree with it, to be honest. And maybe I'm wrong, but I mean, isn't that why they brought Leroy Watson? Isn't that why they have NPF? Isn't that why they got, you know, all these other guys on the roster? Why add a 6th guy to a competition?
We got a Watson, a Charles, and a Harrison.
Everybody else. Yeah, he's just the same guy as everybody else.
They all have first names in their last name. It's Charles and Watson and Harrison and Christian. So they're all the same guy.
Yeah, to me, it's just like I don't feel the need. Yeah, and I agree with Stoney. They got a few looks at Leroy Watson at left tackle, and they were like, we need an upgrade at the depth. I just really feel that's what it's all about. I don't think he's a major participant in the right tackle battle. And I really do think that it's NPF's job to lose, but I also don't think it's that difficult for him to lose it. If that tells you about the depth behind right tackle, which is also concerning. And I do wonder if at some point, since Dylan Radins is struggling to get reps at right guard, if they maybe insert him over there. But again, it's like, if he can't beat out Sadiq Charles, can he really beat out Jalen Dunk, or can he really beat out NPF? I don't know. That's a big question mark as well to me. Is like, what is Dylan Radins in the eyes of this team? Is he more than just depth, or is he only depth? So I think the right tackle is probably the second most important storyline heading into after Will Levis.
So mine's kind of similar, and it's along those lines, which is I think that if you were to, however many they end up keeping, 8, 9, or 10, whatever the number ends up being, probably 9, statistic probability, probably 9, but it's possible they go more. 1, 2, and 3 are locked in with, as in whatever order you want: J.C. Latham, Lloyd Cushenberry, and Peter Skoronski. They are the 3. My question is, and what I'm curious about is, how is 4 through 9, let's say, how is 4 through 9 in our opinions sort of prioritized and ranked? Who is already sort of locked into that space 4 through 9, which I would guess is Daniel Brunskill, NPF, Sadiq Charles, for sure.
I would say Sadiq. I would put it in the order of Sadiq, Charles, NPF, and Daniel Brunskill, but I think all 3 do make this team.
Probably
like, I think the offensive line depth is pretty much sorted out. Like, I think it's your starting 5. Let's just say if you're betting pretty what, a lot of money, here's your starting 5. I think Sadiq Charles is a lock at right guard. I don't think there is a real competition at right guard anymore. I think it is Sadiq Charles. So I think it is those 4, the J.C. Latham, Peter Skoronski, Lloyd Cushenberry, Sadiq Charles are locks. While they're locks and locks to start. I think Daniel Brunskill's a lock, but not obviously a lock to start.
Agreed.
I think NPF is a lock, but not necessarily a lock to start.
Agreed.
And so then you get down to, that's 6, right?
That's 6. Yep. That's what I've got.
You get down to 3 or 4. So it's like Leroy Watson, Jerron Christian battling out for a left tackle spot. You got Dylan Radins, who probably will stick around because he could be a backup at any guard spot and a right tackle.
I have him at 7.
And then, yeah, maybe. And I don't rule out John Ojukwu at all in all this.
That's a good point.
And at this point, they have, and we talked about this in Football and Other F Words, I think this is the best offensive line depth from 1 to 10 that the Tennessee Titans have ever had. Now, it may not be the best top end. If you were to take the best starting 5, I don't think it's the best starting 5, but I do think it's the best depth that they've had for a while. And they have some real hard decisions to make because that right tackle spot is so iffy.
So if Radins is 7, hypothetically, you then have Ojukwu, Duncan, Watson, Christian for 2 spots?
Yeah.
Is that probably about right?
Probably about right. I don't think Duncan's making this team.
Jason says, how is Charles locked in as a starter if training camp has not yet begun? Well, he played a lot of right guard in all the other practices.
Yeah.
So.
He's in my opinion, he has won the right guard battle. Like that battle at right guard.
I would say
nobody else has really taken the amount of reps at right guard that he has.
The way I would describe it is, at this stage, a couple of weeks out from camp, that there are 2 clear leaders at those 2 positions, and they absolutely could lose their jobs. But I think Charles and MPF are your leaders right now entering camp. But entering camp is entering camp. Like, that's why we have a camp to figure this shit out. I just am fascinated by what it's going to look like. I do think there's 3 absolute locks. I think there's probably 3 more that are locks for the roster, which are Charles, MPF, and Brunskill. And then I want to see what the eventual whole list looks like. So that's near the top of the list. All right. So my next big one here, and we're doing just offense today. We'll go to defense on Thursday. Sinkers Beverages and the Kingston Group. Please remember both of those great and amazing local sponsors. And if you have any questions, please, by all means, if you have a storyline that you cannot wait to see play out and we have not included it, please make sure you jump in here. So I am going to be interested in how Hopkins and Ridley and Boyd work with Levis and the play calling, and it's going to be fun to watch. Like, that's just from a nerdy football standpoint, it's going to be fun to watch. I'm not sure any of that stuff is going to tell us anything about the season. I just think that, Hopkins is what he is, very good. Boyd is what he is, very good at his role. Levis is going to be what he, like all that stuff. What I cannot wait to see is the health of Treylon Burks and Kyle Phillips, and then how they are deployed, how they are used, not just in the passing game, but on special teams potentially as well, more with Burks than Phillips. But can they stay healthy? Who else stays healthy? What does the bottom of the receiving core look like? And I think Treylon Burks is a pretty large storyline for this team. Not like if he becomes something that they can depend on, it could really change not only the passing game, but also special teams as well.
Yeah, Treylon Burks obviously has been talked about a lot, and I don't think it's any surprise that he has cracked this list of offseason, training camp storylines. A guy that we really haven't talked about is Kyle Phillips, who has that short, intermediate burst and speed that everybody we have seen on display, right? When he is targeted, he can get you a few extra yards. He is tough to bring down, but he hasn't been available. And then they go and they sign Tyler Boyd, and then they go and they draft Jaquan Jackson. That pretty much spells doom for most wide receivers in Kyle Phillips' situation.
Yep.
But there is a path where when the pads come on, because Kyle Phillips is entering his third season of training camp, and we know every year Kyle Phillips is one of the most talked about wide receivers after camp is over. They're like, well, Kyle Phillips beat this guy and Kyle Phillips beat that guy. So we know when the pads come on at training camp, Kyle Phillips is going to show out. So really, is the storyline more about can Kyle Phillips show out enough to save his job, or can Jaquan Jackson show up Kyle Phillips when the pads come on to make their decision a little bit easier and to go with the guy that they drafted? Because in my mind, I look at it this way. If Jaquan Jackson is not as good as Kyle Phillips, and Kyle Phillips doesn't make this team and Jaquan Jackson does, you have an issue, in my mind, with how you view the best players. And this would fall under Rand Carthon, right? He didn't draft Kyle Phillips, but he drafted Jaquan Jackson. And if Kyle Phillips looks better consistently all throughout the season, or all throughout the offseason, better than Jaquan Jackson, and they keep Jaquan Jackson, that's a Nepo baby move in my mind.
I love that phrase just in general. I will say I thought Jackson, I would say, played equal to or as good as, if not maybe slightly better than Phillips in all of the summer stuff. Just as a general note. What I think is interesting, and this goes to Ed's question, and I think this is a really interesting question, and I'm going to put it into the offensive episode because I'm going to use the return game as part of special teams. We're not going to talk about kicking field goals and Ryan Stonehouse's injury here, but the return game specifically. Do the new special teams rules help shape the final cuts? Maybe less true gunners are needed. I'm not going to be focused on gunners as much. They had Treylon Burks out there doing on gunning and one special teams practice, but I do think Jackson, who also, by the way, has been hurt in his career at Tulane. Like, he was hurt a lot, just the way Kyle Phillips has. So he's got to prove that as well as Burks. I agree that there's a lot of competition for Kyle Phillips, but he has been very good in these competitions, to your point. And which one of these guys can make themselves more valuable? I think Burks has too much ability. And as long as he stays healthy, this is why I think health is the key. If Phillips stays healthy, he gives himself a chance. If Jackson stays healthy, he might have an edge because of the Nepo stuff, which is, I realize that none of them are actually related to Rand Carthon. But I think Burks, like, if one of these guys is a great kick returner, for example, they are going to experiment. We've talked about this. None of these coaches know what to expect with the return game, coverage or return in the kicking game in general. The rules are wild. We've gone over it. I think the health, like, NWI is just going to, there's going to be a nuclear holocaust, and NWI is still going to be running routes and blocking. Like, he's still going to be there.
So he is inevitable. I keep telling everybody he's inevitable.
He's there. So there's basically two spots that are just kind of available, and Treylon Burks is probably going to get one. So
I don't think it's probably. He's getting one.
Yeah.
Can we all just let's all as a collective agree Treylon Burks is making this team?
Yes. I think they want him to make the team. I think Titans fans should want him to make the team.
But even if they don't want him, even if fans don't want him, he's just logically making this team.
Yes.
There is no question surrounding, and if anybody who makes it a question or makes it he could get cut, they're just looking for content.
No,
like
they're not.
at that
He's
point,
not gonna,
let's
he's not
just
gonna
be honest here. You got to remember that Colton Dow kind of figures into this. When do they put him on
that's
the
right.
pup and all that kind of stuff? And because people forget about him
I
and
just
how
did.
that affects how that affects the 53, right? Because I mean, timing is all about how that affects the 53. And because they carry him on the 53, then they put him on whatever injury list they want to put him on, and then they bring someone up. He has to make the initial cut, right? So then they cut him, then they bring someone up from the practice squad or someone else that they sign. So, they may keep 7, but Colton Dow may be one of those 7. Like, you get what I'm saying?
Yeah, yeah.
And so there's a guy that could be on that list, and that's a guy that Rand Carthon again drafted, really went to bat for, said that they were afraid that I don't know why, but they were afraid that if he wouldn't choose them in undrafted free agency, or he would get be one of the hottest names on undrafted free agent market or whatever. So they obviously think really high of Colton Dow. I at the end of the day, it's down to Kyle Phillips and Jaquan Jackson.
Yep.
You're not keeping both. Unless both do something, because what you've said is that you have seen that there's a possibility that this new kickoff rule provides more flexibility to have 2 return people back there that allow you to do different things. So creatively, maybe there is a spot where they both take up a return spot for one certain game or something. But that's really hard to stomach, to keep 2 slot receivers to do something that Tajay Spears could do, to do something that Treylon Burks could do.
No, what I was saying? Yes, I do. And what I want to be clear about, just to make sure everyone's listening is clear what I'm saying. I think the new return rules, where you can have 2 guys back there, and I think most people will, benefits Jackson, not Phillips. I don't think Phillips is going to be used as a kick returner, because he's not built in a way. He's got short space agility, but that's
he's
more
of a punt returner. But again, you don't want punt returning, in my opinion. So
not based on.
And I agree with you. I'm just saying it's really hard for Kyle Phillips to make this team. And I don't know if the team's necessarily going to keep 7 wide receivers, but I do think that regardless of how many they keep, I'm 90% sure that Kyle Phillips is not going to be one of them, unless Jaquan Jackson just sucks when the pads come on. And if he just sucks when the pads come on, then he doesn't need to make the team.
Here's the thing. If they both have here's what I would expect, and here's my prediction. I think they both have solid camps. As long as they stay. Again, that's why Burks,
and Jaquan Jackson will get the tiebreaker.
Burks, Phillips, Jackson, all of this is also tied to health, right? Like, you've got to be available. It is your best asset in the NFL. So if let's say they all stay healthy for the majority of camp, I think that Jackson and Burks are more versatile for this team, and with the new kickoff rules and with what they can do on the offense, I think they can do more things and create more value for themselves based on from some of the players or some of the people I've talked to. What I think is interesting is I think Phillips is more likely to clear waivers and end up on your scout team. I don't think he's going to be a commodity for a lot of people.
I think who said that a week or so ago, or was that someone on Football Under the F Words? I think it was Football Under the F Words. I think Mike said that after Mike went on a big rampage saying that Caleb Murphy would never clear waivers if he was cut, and then he goes on and does fucking shit all. I don't think Kyle Phillips clears waivers.
Okay.
Because I do think that there is a quality. There's a quality wide receiver there, and there are a lack of quality proven wide receivers.
The Rams will pick him up and make him successful.
You put him in the slot with Matt Stafford, and he's probably getting 1,000 yards. But there are teams that would look at Kyle Phillips and probably say, "Man, that's a solid and starting wide receiver 3 in the NFL. Maybe he stays healthy with us, and we find him opportunity to keep." Because that's the problem, right? The problem isn't whether he's good or not, and it's not really whether he's healthy or not. It's really, where is the opportunity and what's the reason to keep him on the 53-man roster with the depth of the Tennessee Titans? So other teams have other depth issues where they can take a chance on a guy like Kyle Phillips because they don't need him to return.
I see what you're saying.
They need him to be the slot guy.
I see what you're saying. So let me instead of because we could just sit here and argue about whether he will or won't clear waivers. Here's what I think that the Titans are going to think. right? I think they're going to keep Burks is 5, Jackson 6. Or I guess, well, I guess Burks is 4, NWI 5, Jackson 6. I think they keep Dow, but he goes pup, so that's 7. But and then they think Phillips will clear waivers. I think that's what their strategy is going to be if you're saying what are your predictions for final cuts at the wide receiver position, it's going to be the big 3 with Burks and NWI, Jackson, Dow on pup, and trying to get Phillips to clear waivers. I think that's going to be their strategy, if I had to guess. And
I agree, that's probably their strategy. And I'm not saying it's a bad strategy. I just am saying I don't think it's a strategy that will come to fruition.
Gotcha. And look, that's totally possible. Somebody could absolutely claim him. What I think is fascinating, and this is tying into sort of my other point, which we've already discussed, and I cannot get it out of my brain how interested I cannot wait to see that anybody practice the kickoff return. I can't wait. It's so interesting to me. And I think you're going to see, if I had to guess, you are going to see players with running back like open field skills, but behind the line of scrimmage, zone running type of skills where you can cut and slash and break tackles. And it's not about like pure straight line speed, getting to the edge and outrunning everybody and, all that stuff. It's not going to be like that. I think you're going to see Burks and Tajay Spears and Jaquan Jackson and guys that are built like that have those kinds of skills. I think they're going to be used all across the league. And I think if you can make yourself valuable on 3 or 4 or 5 plays a game, and then also be, hey, I'm the guy who can back up all 3 of these other positions on the offense. By the way, I hustle and bust my ass to get down and make tackles on special teams, maybe. Like, you can make yourself valuable enough to make the team. Is that Kyle Phillips or Jaquan Jackson? I think it's more Jackson. I think Kyle Phillips might be a better, more polished receiver. So
I think you look at 2 ways. I think as a Titans fan, you should want Jaquan Jackson and Treylon Burks to make noise as kick returners. Because I do think what you're saying is right. They are the 2 guys that fit that bill the most, but also probably have the best explosiveness aspect to them and the yards after catch. It's a good mix of initial burst and yards after catch, because it's more of yards after catch for Treylon Burks, initial burst for Jaquan Jackson. So they provide you 2 different things, and obviously Jackson can do punt returning. But if Kyle Phillips were somehow to emerge as a guy that maybe instead of a running back, it's because he's so shifty and he makes just good decisions. There is an element of that too, is that maybe he could just slink behind, some of these bigger guys. It's not necessarily a bad thing if he were to emerge, because he does provide you better, more competent depth behind Tyler Boyd. Like, let's say that Tyler Boyd goes down with injury. Would you rather have Kyle Phillips or Jaquan Jackson fill that role? I'd rather have Kyle Phillips fill that role.
I think he's probably a more polished professional. So, he's a more polished professional at this stage today at that role. The one thing I'll disagree with, I don't think Kyle Phillips has, because I think you're going to see creative ass blocking too on returns. You're going to see weird pulling, and this is going to be shifting over here, and the defense is going to pull these guys back here. It is going to be very creative, and I don't think his skills are very useful in that setting. In my opinion, that's my guess.
Yeah, and I'm not saying that he for sure will. I'm just providing an avenue to where maybe he can surprise you, because we don't know. Again, we don't know hardly anything about how the Tennessee Titans plan to deploy the kickoff rule, how they plan to block quite yet. I mean, that's a big answer that can tie into all of this, is we don't know anything about it. And that's a big training camp unknown that we should have a good idea of at least what the first plan A through plan C is. Strategy A through strategy Z.
Week 1, and you're not going to see it in the preseason, week 1 in the NFL is going to be bonkers with kickoff returns.
Yeah.
You're going to see some shit come out of some asses.
I wonder how many penalties will come off the first few kicks.
There's going to be turnovers. There's going to be scoring. There's going to be big plays. There's going to be dumb plays. There's going to be penalties. It will be the most interesting play of the game for every game in the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season. And then we'll start to figure it out, and we'll start to see trends and strategies sort of routinely replicated and deployed throughout the course of the season. But I'm telling, nobody has a clue. Nobody at any team has a clue what's going on. So here's ultimately my last one here for the offense. Sinkers Beverages, by the way, Kingston Group, Stacking the Inbox, and of course Lower Broad Hockey, both on Substack. Go check them out. We've sort of gone on a journey, a tight end journey, if you will, this offseason, with Josh Wiley coming in physically more prepared, confidence more prepared, Chigakonkwo being the more experienced and maybe more polished player. Nick Vanette looks like your tight end 3. I think what ultimately my question is does it even matter if there's a pecking order? Does it even matter who's tight end 1 or 2? Does it my question about this is going to be, are these the 3 guys? And I don't know if it matters as long as Brian Callahan and Nick Holes have a plan to deploy them the way they want to deploy them. I don't think it matters which one gets more reps. I don't think it matters which one gets more targets. I think if they are used and their skills are maximized, I don't care. And I think the storyline is going to be just which moment does each player get used? And that's going to be more interesting to me. Otherwise, I don't care if Josh Wiley's tight end 1 or Nick Chigakonkwo is tight end 1. And I don't know if it matters.
Yeah, I'm with you. It's almost like maybe from 0 to 20 is Nick Vanette, and then from 20 to the other 20 is Chigakonkwo, and then you get in the red zone and it's Josh Wiley. Like, I could totally see that, right?
Sure.
You're trying to get out from under your own end zone, and so you need to maybe create some breathing room running, so you're going to put Nick Vanette out there to block for you.
Sure.
And ultimately, I kind of think that you're right. I've seen people say they need to bring in another tight end. They're missing a tight end. I don't know who they're going to bring in, and I don't know why anybody thinks they need a tight end. I mean, this is a team that's probably going to run 11 personnel at a high rate. They got 3 competent tight ends who can do different things, but also do the same thing, right? They can all block. They can all be red zone threats. So I don't know if it really matters to me that I don't see a reason to have a 4th tight end. I think anybody wanting a 4th tight end, I don't understand why. Unless it's like taking up a roster spot for something else. You're taking up a roster spot for a linebacker or a safety or something else that you actually need depth at. You don't need depth at tight end right now.
Unless it's like sort of like that pseudo running back, H-back kind of thing, and that those guys don't grow on trees.
But Chig does that.
Chig should. Yeah, I agree. I agree. So what'll be, again, I think it's the most boring position group, I think, on the offense, honestly, going into camp. But I think
it's just so cut and dry, right? I mean,
but in a good way.
You can get into the minute details of, you know, who's going to have more snaps. And I think ultimately Chig probably does have the most snaps. But it may not amount to anything. But this team may not need a tight end for it to really amount to anything. They need 2 tight ends, or they need the tight end room to get 750 yards as a unit. Anything over that, you're fine.
Do you have off the top of your head? I'm asking you this off the top of your head, so you may not have it. Do you have like who led the league in 11 personnel formations last year? Like, can you give me a percentage?
If it wasn't the Bengals, I would be very surprised.
Well, do you have the number?
Like high 60s or low 70s, 11 personnel use.
So again, let's just take a guess at this then. 60%, right, of the snaps, and so. The situation and the routes they want to run based on the matchups they get are probably going to dictate which one tight end is in that 11 personnel group, right? And I completely agree. When they go out of 11 personnel and it's an extra blocking tight end because it's around the goal line or a 3rd and short, it's Nick Vanette. But I think who it's packaged with could be different also based on matchups and personnel. I think they have 3 guys that do 3 very different things very well. I think Chig is the most versatile of the group. I think if you're looking at Wiley, of course, down the seam and in the red zone and the high point guy, and if you got a slow safety or a small safety, maybe Wiley's the guy. I just think it's going to be interesting to see how Brian Callahan maximizes each of their skills. Which routes are each of them running? Which positions are each of them being put into? Because we saw a lot of like motion and changing it up and, all these different things that they were doing in camp and stuff I can't get into like specifics on, but like the 40% of the time you could see 2 tight ends. And I think your guess is as good as mine as to which 2 are out there.
Well, I'll say this. According to Sumer Sports, which I didn't even know they had this up, but 11 personnel usage in 2023, the Bengals were 4th. They ran 747 plays out of 1,007 were out of 11 personnel. So that's 74.2, and they were fourth.
Damn.
The Rams were 93.1.
93% of their snaps are 11%.
That's what it says. Panthers were 88%, which I do remember that a lot of people were talking about how they probably should have ran less 11 personnel because they have shitty wide receivers. The Colts were 77%, which amounted to a massive 18 passing touchdowns, which I want to revisit the Shane Steichen hype train.
They won a lot of games with Gardner Minshew.
Yeah. Well, Gardner Minshew apparently is the reason why everybody thinks Shane Steichen is great. And 74.2% for the Bengals. So 74.2%. And they were, let's see.
Where were the Titans last year?
The Titans, let me see if the Titans are on here real quick.
93% of 11 personnel is the most predictable formational offense I've ever heard of in my entire life. And it still was very good.
Titans were 55.1%, according to Sumer Sports.
Okay. All right. And I assume that's probably bottom third.
That is 26.
Yeah, there
26.
Bottom third. Yep, that was right. Okay. I mean, that's still more than half, which is wild. So, again, like, this is my point with the tight ends. I think it is very cut and dry. I think it is boring in a good way. I think it's three different guys that do three different things. None of them are elite, but all of them are solid. I think it's actually a good position for them to be in. How they are deployed, how they are used, which one is the one in any one given situation. I think it's more about their decision-making about the tight end and the usage rather than who's the one or the two or the three. I mean, Nick Vanette's the three, but that's because he does a different thing. So ultimately, it'll be interesting to watch in camp, but like, I don't think there's any questions about him really. It's just sort of like who gets used when and where. And that's really what's interesting. And then honestly, we won't know about the 11 personnel percentage until the season starts. So,
but we kind of do know. I mean, I think that's where we're at. I think we know that 55% that was last year is going to be.
It's going to go up.
Maybe not 70 something, but it's definitely going to be probably 10% higher at least.
69.
You don't go out and spend money on Tyler Boyd and Calvin Ridley and have DeAndre Hopkins not to run 11 personnel and to run out there Chig and Josh Wiley instead at the same time.
with a quarterback who says he who passes best wins.
Yes.
Oh man. I think it's there's so many more questions on the defense, honestly. The fact that we are having a discussion about depth being interesting for the Titans and depth being interesting at the receiving core, and that I didn't even mention Pollard or Spears. I guess I could ask you who is the third best running back on the team, and does it need to be a person that does something totally different, or does it need to be somebody that can fill the shoes? That might be the most interesting question at running back.
I don't. The thing is, to me, I guess I'm just wearing American Conference colored glasses. But what can't Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears do individually that another running back can?
No, nothing really.
Right? I mean, because we saw Tajay Spears move piles with 3 or 4 guys on top of him. I don't know. I mean, I'm just not. I guess I'm not worried about it in the sense that you have. They want one because that's what they said. But I don't think you have to have one that is the battering ram, goal line, heavy plotting back. You know.
So let me ask you a philosophical football question here, and this could apply to every position, but I think it is interesting in the third running backs decision. I was talking to a guy, and I think I mentioned this on the show. I was talking to a guy who said, "Look, all the things the Titans have done are interesting and they're better, but every single backup player they have does the exact same thing that the starter does." And my first thought was like, isn't that a good thing in theory? Because then they step in and they can do the thing that you're asking the starter to do with less difficulty and drop off. Or do you need somebody that offers you something different, some versatility? And I think the answer might be different based on positions, but I'm just curious your reaction to that. Mason Rudolph does what Will Levis does, and I think that's a good thing at the quarterback position.
I think that in a pinch, the way that the NFL is just so sudden, you want your backup players to be able to do what your starters do, because that means there's less change of the offense or defense around one player. I mean, you're then almost trying to change 10 players for one player, or trying to change what you've taught for a couple of weeks for one guy. So, I mean, that's why they had to bring in Josh Dobbs, because they knew Josh Dobbs could run the offense where Malik Willis couldn't. Yeah. And, I also look at it this way, is that for running back, Tony Pollard and Tajay Spears, what we have talked about all offseason, that they make the offense less predictable no matter who is out there. You don't know what they're doing. You put in Hassan Haskins at the goal line, you put in Julius Chestnut, you can do less things. Like, your offense has to do less things. You have to shrink the playbook. So in my mind, I'm sure that's what they want. I'm sure they do want a guy that's like a Dylan Johnson, Hassan Haskins, Julius Chestnut to put in at the goal line to take some unnecessary carries, off of Tajay Spears.
I like Jabari. Jabari Small got a lot of love from the coaching staff during drills.
Yeah, that's fine. They're just pandering to University of Tennessee fans.
Well, they've got to draft Tennessee players to be successful in Nashville.
Well, they didn't even draft him, so there you go. But I will say that I do think that, to me, instead of maybe looking at it as you have to have the goal line back that goes in between the tackles, to me, I'd much rather have Tony Pollard or Tajay Spears still be that guy, because I'd rather be able to have the option to swing the ball on the outside, to pass the ball on the outside, than I would to have the predictability of Hassan Haskins, who you're either faking it to Hassan Haskins or you're giving it to Hassan Haskins.
And I actually we begged for this, and at the end of the Vrabel era, they said they were going to do this, and they did it in practice, and then did some of it, I guess, last year with Henry and Spears. I guess now that I shouldn't go down that path too hard. But like 21 personnel with both Pollard and Spears split side by side next to Will Levis in the gun seems pretty dangerous. Seems pretty hard to predict what direction the play is going to go or who's going to get the ball. And so I don't know. I think I would much rather have the two of them in there than anybody else. But I was more curious on a philosophical level, because my instinct was, no, to your point, if you have to replace a piece, a safety, a tackle, an offensive lineman, a receiver, a running back, you want the machine to keep working at somewhat of a similar pace and clip and functionality. But at the same time, it's more predictable maybe that way. But I don't know. I could see both sides of that one. But I kind of agree with you. I think having if the number one skill of X player can be replicated by his backup, that means the least amount of impact on your team to some degree. So I thought that was an interesting philosophical debate on the sidelines there that I was having at practice a couple weeks ago. So we're almost through the desert here, folks. We got defensive questions, storylines, things we're looking forward to coming up on Thursday. And of course, SEC Media Days next week. So we'll just sort of throw some SEC primer at you and get you guys ready. If any big news, of course, breaks in Titans land, we'll be all over it next week. But make sure you stay tuned to all the other great shows across the network. The Gold Standard covering the Preds, Lower Broad Hockey now on Substack. You got Stack in the Inbox, Football and Other F Words, the Music City Audible. You've got the Hot Read podcast, the Paul Carr.
Music City Audible has Chris Johnson on today's episode.
I saw that. Yeah, very interesting. They talked about Derrick Henry. Really good. That's a good get, as we say in the business. So go check out Music City Audible. Also brought to you by Sinkers and Bluegrass Beverages. So go check that out. And so we've got a lot of stuff planned for you guys to build up here coming out of the holiday. Once you get out of the holiday, Zach, you can start to count down days until football happens. It's like we're just a couple weeks away from camp. We got media days next week.
Preseason coming up soon.
We're getting there, baby. We're getting there. It's still hot as shit, but we're getting there. Kingston Group, Sinkers Beverages. Love you guys. Appreciate you guys. Great to have you. For Zach, I'm Braden. Thanks for listening. Thanks for hanging out. If you're watching on YouTube, thumbs up. Podcast app, please subscribe, rate, and review. We appreciate you guys supporting us and for listening. Otherwise, have a great week. We'll talk to you guys on Thursday.